Hello everybody, welcome to Discussing Tabletop. I hope everybody's having a great day. We are joined, of course, today by a special guest, Chris, who works over at Brotherwise Games, who will be sharing with us some of us wisdom on the products and stuff they do there, and working in the industry, of course. But as usual, we do have a full docket to talk about, and after we are done talking with Chris, we do have a few other things to hit into. We'll be talking about Dragon's new unearthed arcana. Pathfinder 2.0 has a demo adventure. This is an interesting one I do want to dive into a lot of. Monte has released a Consent in Gaming book. I think it's a very interesting book to put out there. There's a couple of board games I want to hit on. Ticket to Ride Japan, Coraline, Beware the Other Mother, and Hako, Onna. I think I'm doing it right. Just I might have not copied it down. And there is one we might hit on, which I guess a more, I would call it adult-oriented RPG Tingleverse, the Chuck Tingle adventure. I don't know a lot about Tingle. I just know he's not work, and that's pretty much it. So that tells you a lot about that one. But let's start with the most important thing, of course, is we have a guest here. So hi, welcome. So why don't we start with the very basics? What is it that you do?
So I am CEO of a tiny board game company called Brotherwise Games. Brotherwise was started by my brother and I back in, 2020, I want to say. And it started on sort of a bet where we've been playing a lot of games together. We finally were in the same city after a long time being in different cities, and we were feeling like, hey, let's work on some games and see what we can come up with. And I think we bet maybe a bottle of scotch. I don't remember what it was. I actually won the bet. Came up with the first game, and Johnny came up with what went on to become Boss Monsters, which was our big hit. It went on to be sort of a big hit on Kickstarter, as well as in retail. And so that allowed us over a period of years to put out some other games. We put out some Boss Monster expansions. We put out Unearthed. Most recently, we put out Call to Adventure. And most importantly, the success of all those games allowed me to go full time for the company about 3 years ago. So we remain a company, just a couple people, but we've got a fair number of games, and I think we have a fairly well-known presence in the gaming industry now. But it's tremendous fun, a huge learning opportunity, and something I feel very proud to do.
No, I have to say, Boss Monster is a favorite of mine. We've had a lot. Joe has the copies of it out of the two of us, and we love playing it a lot. So that was it was a very interesting, it's a game that I've seen level of popularity when your company hasn't grown to the levels of some of those other big companies which put out a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's a little key. Boss Monster was been the number one selling game in the card and dice category for a few seasons of the past few years, and people are always shocked when they find out that we're essentially a 2.5 person company. But what we are, we're a tiny company. We see ourselves as sort of a boutique. I don't know that we ever really want to be as big as some of those other companies. We like out just a couple games a year, and we like being able to invest all of our attention into those games.
Mm-hmm. Now you have put out a bunch of expansions for Boss Monster. Asking about expansions. Do you have plans for expansion? Do you have an end for a lot of your games? How do you go about that thought pattern?
Sure. Expansions come about in a couple ways. One is you see some sort of exploitable play space that you say, this is open play space, and people would enjoy this, and we should pursue this. And in the case of Boss Monster, there's just lots and lots of play space that we haven't gotten into yet. And so, with Boss Monster, we think about what are, what is the lifetime of this game, and we would love to sort of keep adding to it over the years, and having it continue to grow. Having said that, we're sort of resting the brand for a year because I think we were putting out too many expansions and sort of saturating people's willingness to explore and play with those expansions. Then you can take a game like Unearthed, where we just brought out The Lost Tribe, which is the first expansion for that one, and possibly the last one. It's hard to say. At this point, I feel like we've done a lot to explore the play space there. The Lost Tribe is sort of a 3-in-1 expansion. It offers a solo mode, it offers enhancements to the base game, and it lets you add in a 5th player. And I don't think there's a lot of wisdom in coming up with more expansions just for the sake of expansions. You see that done, and what we see happen a lot with other games is they add expansions until one of them breaks the game. And at that point, it's sort of you've shot your wad to some degree. So we'd rather not do that. We don't want to come up with an expansion that breaks the game. We want them all to be useful and valuable and fun, and add new play space to that.
Makes a lot of sense. And that's an interesting thing because, there are definitely some brands out there that. Okay, let's just say the elephant in the room. I do like Munchkin, but Steve Jackson Games puts out way too much stuff, completely and utterly. And so I can understand wanting to take a break so that everyone can catch up with it. That's the best attitude I've seen in a lot of time for this kind of thing.
Yeah, so we Boss Monster gets compared to Munchkin a lot, both in terms of sort of theme and in terms of growth pattern, but we'll never, ever put out as many expansions as they have for Munchkin, which I think they've done very well with. I mean, Munchkin continues to be a top-selling game, and the expansions continue to do well. One thing that differs from us a little bit is Munchkin, I think, is much more open to licensed expansions, and Boss Monster is sort of its own IP in a way that makes incorporating other licenses tough. And so, could you have a Marvel Boss Monster? I suppose you could, but would you want to? It's just a different beast in that sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's finding what works for the games you're building. Joe, do you have any questions before I kind of take over the ones? I'd like to throw it out to you.
Yeah, I mean, the only kind of expansion I could even possibly see would be maybe going with something specifically since it's kind of almost an RPG, but it's also 8-bit, maybe original Nintendo or something.
Yeah, I mean, we basically try to bake a lot of those references into the game as Easter eggs and as satire.
Right.
And so, to some degree, Boss Monster borrows and pokes fun at a lot of different stuff. I mean, if you start looking through the cards, you'll see that just about every card has some reference in it to something from geek or pop culture. So yeah, never say never. Who knows what we'll want to do with that property a couple of years from now. The 8-bit fad, I think, has slowed down a bit in the past couple of years. So I don't know what our players' appetite will be for more Boss Monster, but certainly the plan is to continue to add to it in little meaningful ways that sort of appeal to the base player most, I guess.
So that does lead us to talking about your other two games, though, of course. Unearthed, which is the one you've had out for a bit, which is supposed to be more like a luck and dice placement and set collection, of course. Yeah. And then Call to Adventure, which Is it because I feel like Unearthed even has a like the idea of like the tribe of dwellers. Everything has like an idea of fantasy. Is it like is a fantasy your big genre for what you kind of theme things around, or is it just like those are the ideas you've had?
Without a doubt, we trend towards fantasy, and that's a safe statement for gaming in general. I've seen a lot of complaints on various boards and Board Game Geek about how fantasy has sort of become the dominant default theme in gaming. And I agree with that critique. I think we have to, as companies, we've got to explore other themes, lest we sort of dry up people's taste for that one. Having said that, the theme for Unearthed, when the game was originally pitched to us, and that's the only one that's done by outside designers so far. Okay. Matthew Ransom and Jason Harner are two really talented designers who we like to work with. They pitched that as a game about bees foraging for pollen and for nectar. And it was beautiful. It was a gorgeous prototype. I mean, we could have probably just taken the prototype right to print. But we thought that with more realistic themes, your experience tends to start and stop with what's presented in the game. You're not likely to sort of imagine yourself as a bee out there foraging for pollen. And when you leave the game, you're not likely to go, man, that was fun, I wish I was a bee. It's sort of a situating theme. Whereas a more fantastical theme gives the player a chance to immerse themselves a little bit more. Mm-hmm. We also try very hard to put an emotional hook into each of our games. So in Boss Monster, that hook was sort of retro gaming nostalgia. And with Unearthed, we actually were trying to do a sort of a hook around melancholy. So the art for the game, the theme of the game of sort of this ancient lost civilization and these cute little guys trying to reclaim it, all of that was meant to trigger sort of an emotional response to the game. And that's just more easily done with something that you can sort of imagine yourself and situate yourself in. So in this case, fantasy. But could it have been a more modern post-apocalyptic theme? Could it have been, people in suits trying to score, contracts? You could do anything. The theme is, as a designer and a publisher, you're looking for something that people will think about and resonate to later on.
Yeah.
So that's just why we happen to be there. And Call to Adventure initially came out of this idea of we've been reading a lot of character-driven fantasy, including Patrick Rothfuss's Name to Win series, and we thought, man, how do you gamify it? It's like, not much happens. Like, there's no huge battles. There's relatively few fights. The interesting, neat stuff about these books is the people as they develop. So that's why we made Call to Adventure, and that's why it sort of has this generic fantasy theme. It's because we were pulling those, those themes and those images from our love of fantasy literature.
Okay. So that's an interesting thing that I do feel like is a good question. Is like, do you feel like there is specific games that will pertain to a genre, or is it like you can adapt it? Like, as you're saying for Unearthed, how you could put together other genres to it. But like Call to Adventure, like Boss Monster, definitely, yes, it starts with the fantasy, but it goes into like all the different kind of like retro ones. But Call to Adventure, the idea of like that hero building is very fantasy. Would it work better? Like, could it? I know, like, not that it couldn't work in other genre. Is there like that like obvious genre that says like this is what really is best for it? Are there like? Do you feel like some games are like that like it just tells you what genre it should be?
I mean, for the games we make, I'd say yes. For the games I play, I'm often so heavily biased towards whatever's presented to me that I don't know that I necessarily do a good job of making that comparison later on. I mean, Ticket to Ride, it's presented, it's trains. Could it be hikers, hiking across national parks? It could, but trains feels right. Like, and I think that's partly just because I've played it so many times that that's what feels right.
Mm-hmm.
We have toyed around with the idea of call to adventure sci-fi. That'd be relatively easy to do and give people a chance to sort of explore sci-fi characters. Could we do call to adventure horror? I would love to see what that would look like. How would you sort of gamify a horror protagonist experience, or would you instead gamify the antagonist experience where you're a serial killer Freddy Krueger type growing over the course of the game? That would be fun, if not a little gruesome. That's the... I do think that you can fit a lot of different themes onto things, but where you run into trouble is where, and you see this talked about all the time, where you paste the theme on, where you're more or less looking for, oh man, we got to get some cool artwork for this, and we got to get something that hooks people. What about underworld elves? So I think that's where you run into trouble. And for all three of our game lines that have been released so far, the themes were not pasted on. We put a lot of time and energy thinking about what will emotionally transport people here and what makes sense given the mechanics. So could we have done something else? Probably. But did the themes we eventually came up with feel best to us? Absolutely. There's a reason they're in there.
I agree that it's a slippery slope, because one of the games that we've talked about before that's kind of ventured off of what they started was some of the pandemic stuff. Yeah. And they came out with like pandemic volcano. It was Pompeii, I think, and there was another one that was like a war version of it, and it's like that just doesn't feel right.
Netherlands, and keeping it from flooding from the locks. The boy putting his thumb in it.
It was a natural disaster. It's like, yeah, it kind of works, but it's really off base. Like, I'm like, I understand they're trying to expand and keep coming out with stuff, but then it kind of felt like you could say a game by the makers of Pandemic and have it something that's kind of in that world, but different. I think it was just a weird extra thing that they did. So I can see what you're saying. You don't want to you want to make sure everything feels right, and it's not just like, oh, well, we want to make something else along this line, so we're just going to slap this on and call it that, even though it doesn't fit exactly.
Yeah, I agree, and I think probably one of the things you're seeing there, and I have not played a lot of these expansions, so I can't necessarily comment on it in an informed way, but you might be seeing what happens when publishers take the reins and a designer, Matt Leacock is a brilliant designer, but I don't know to what degree he was involved in those expansions. Who knows? I mean, it might have just been someone like me who has more of a publishing role saying, man, I'll bet we can make some money doing pandemic zombies, And so that's where you've got to be careful. And when we, for instance, with Unearthed, when we got the submission from Matt and Jason, we initially sort of said, guys, we don't know. We're open to a thematic change on this one. And they said, yes, but we really want to be involved in whatever you come up with. And so it wasn't just Brotherwise sort of putting a theme on top of that. We sat down with them and we said, here's some ideas. What feels right to you as the designers based on where you started with this game and where you see it going. And so ultimately, I think they were really happy with the theme that we came up with, partly because we came up with it collaboratively.
Mm. Okay. Now, you did mention something that we've talked about a bunch on this show, and that's Kickstarter, that you started with Kickstarter. What is your kind of experience with that kind of beginning for a game, and do you, have you moved away from using it? Do you still use it? I know you mentioned that you still do. You did one of your stuff is coming out. Was it the expansion for Unearthed? That was Kickstarter.
No, Call to Adventure was our last Kickstarter.
Oh, that was your Kickstarter. See, I'm forgetful. Don't mind me.
I know it's good. I mean, it always makes me happy to know that we have enough games now that people confuse them. Like that's your goal as a game designer.
Well, you mentioned it like a half an hour ago. I should remember that. But goldfish. But anyway, so yeah, Kickstarter. What is your experience with that? Like, do you rely on it a lot now, or is it just something that you feel like in certain situations it is a useful tool?
Yeah. So I mean, Kickstarter's contentious in the sense that when we originally started on it with Boss Monster, it was really dominated by folks like us. A couple of idiots who, were taking a shot at making a game, and oh my god, it actually worked. So it's since become a pretty common way of generating publicity about the game. And for new titles and new lines, I would be very surprised if we didn't continue to exploit that avenue, because it's just such a great literal kickstart for a game's life. Now, where you run into trouble is if you're sort of just going back there to make some good money, because there's so many games that are coming out that it's a quick and easy way to get money right off the bat. And we do see that happening. We could conceivably be accused of it ourselves, although with Boss Monster, for example, we took Boss Monster 1 to Kickstarter. That's how we got started. We took Boss Monster 2 back to Kickstarter because at the time we just didn't really have any working capital enough to put out another copy in there. But since then, we've gotten established enough that we haven't taken Boss Monster back to Kickstarter. I think we did digital Boss Monster there, but that's another story. We didn't actually take Unearthed to Kickstarter. When we initially got started there, it had a very bad reputation amongst retailers and distributors as stealing sales that would eventually have gone to them. And I think most people have sort of made their peace with it, sort of realizing, yeah, the marketing benefits you get out of a launch are really outweigh the potential loss of sales to retailers. They're more likely to make up those sales later on if it's had a big launch. That's changing a little bit with the very foreshortened lifespan of games. So we have so many publishers and so many games coming out that the sales tail for games, which used to be, months if not years long, has contracted down to weeks long. Even for successful games, you're going to make a big chunk of your money in those first couple months, and so that's sort of, on one hand, it makes it harder for us to convince retailers that this is a good thing to do. On the other hand, it's really hard for us to say no to that initial influx of cash, because with Kickstarter, we grab people when they're most interested, before the game's even out. It's fresh and interesting and new. And we sort of call it the cult of the minute. They want to know what's the new thing out this minute. That's what I'm going to spend my money on. So, a big fan of Kickstarter. Obviously, I think there's ways to abuse it. I think it is a little bit responsible for this glut of publishers and games that we have going right now. And I do expect that it will dry up a little bit in the next couple of years. But it is a wonderful tool. It's a democratizing tool. I mean, the thought that my brother and I, who knew nothing about games publishing, knew nothing about how to make this into a business, were able to, is entirely due to Kickstarter. 100%.
Okay. Which comes to a question, actually, I think is a very good one, because we do see, like, we've talked to a lot of people in smaller companies, and a lot of them haven't been able to go that full-time route, and you've managed to. What is it like doing that? Because you are, again, like, what was it like learning that everything you needed to do for, like, running a small company?
Well, first off, it is awesome. It is truly, truly awesome. It's the best job in the world, and I am grateful every day for being able to do what I do. I love the people in this industry. I love making things. I love making games. I love seeing people play our games, and the people that we get to work with, both the designers and the artists and the distributors and the retailers, are uniformly really cool people. So If you're looking at this job and you're thinking, man, that job is fun, it totally is. It is the best job you can possibly have, and I love it. However, getting here was, one snafu after another. We didn't know what we were doing, and so we continue to have mistakes. We're always learning, always figuring the industry out a little bit more. Sometimes our mistakes are little mistakes that, were just a few $1,000s, and sometimes they're giant mistakes where we are losing tens of thousands of dollars because we just didn't know what we were doing. And so it is hard to get into this business as a publisher, and it's harder to grow and stay viable. And that's partly because there's no training program for this. Unless you went and worked for a bigger, more established publisher and were able to make your mistakes in a more secure setting, this is a very high-risk environment. And so we've just been lucky, frankly. The fact that we're able to keep doing what we do despite making any number of mistakes is, I think, just a testament to one, how well we work together as brothers, but two, just how lucky we've been. And I don't say that lightly. I think luck plays a huge role in it.
Okay. Joe, do you have any questions before I move on to my next one?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. Now, this was an interesting one. Because it was your second game, what was it like to be, pitched by someone, effectively? For Jason and Matthew to come up to you and be like, hey, can you publish our game for us, kind of thing?
Well, it was cool that they trusted us. That was pretty neat. They actually pitched us a game, I want to say about a year before Call to Adventure. The game was, I'm trying to remember. I cannot remember what it was called. It was like Dice Lords or something like that. And we basically said to them, this is cool, but it's a little bit too complex for Brotherwise, and it's got these various issues, and go back, work on this, and if you still want to pitch to us a year from now, we'll see you at next year's Gen Con. And they did. They went back and revised it heavily, simplified it a lot, and worked it into shape. So we made them, I remember distinctly being at Gen Con, them pitching us the game, us playing it and going, yeah, pretty cool. Why don't you keep showing it around at Gen Con, and we'll think about it at the convention. And, if nobody else has jumped on it, we'd like to take a closer look at it. And we went back to the hotel room that night, and we were sort of lying there trying to go to sleep. And we were like, man, imagine if the theme was this, and imagine if you were able to do this. And, we had some ideas for some mechanical changes, and we got pretty worked up about it, enough so that I actually got up in the middle of the night and texted them and said, hey, we want to take that prototype with us. Don't give it to somebody else. And fortunately, they were willing to do that. And fortunately, they're great guys, and they are very collaborative in their process. So, obviously they work together as a team, and that means they have to know how to sort of do a little bit of give and take. And so they were good at responding to our comments where we said, what if we tried this? And they would think about it and go back and test it. And in general, they were really, really open to our ideas of how to improve the game. They didn't say yes to all of them, and we respected that as the original designers. We didn't force any changes down their throats. I think we did a good job. I think we're relatively easy to work with as publishers, and even though we're small, the advantage of a small publisher is they're going to pour all of their energy into your game. So for those game designers who might be listening to this, if you're bummed because you weren't able to, get Fantasy Flight to take a look at your game, maybe don't be, because Fantasy Flight's a great company, but your game is going to be one of 200 they put out that year, and a smaller company is going to be able to put a lot more energy and time and possibly money into it, despite the difference in size. So I loved it. It's great. We love working with them. We're actually going to be working with them on another game, but this is one where we had the idea, and we're sort of bringing them on as outside designers, developers.
Cool. Now, this is an interesting one I want to ask, because the tabletop as like an entire genre is a lot of different things. Are you planning to stick kind of like the board game, card game, dice game realm, or like would you ever think of like spanning out into like more of the like the semi-collectible card games, or even the RPG genres? Did you ever think of like spreading out into some of the other branches of tabletop?
Conceivably, but there is some wisdom to staying with what you know. RPGs are notoriously hard to make money on. Collectible card games are notoriously hard to break into. It's not just, is this a good game? It's, is this game good enough that I'm going to spend my $20 I'd normally spend on Magic this week on your game? And so that's very tricky. We do have some thoughts about miniatures games.
Okay.
But if we do a miniatures game, it'll be a Brotherwise game. It's not going to be some sprawling Warhammer sort of thing. It's going to be light. It's going to be approachable. It's going to be fun and themed in an interesting way, and likely to play to our strengths. So it's a good question, but we really are a boutique. We're a tiny little outfit. You're looking at my office. This is my office. That door is my bedroom door over there. So it's not like we're in some office park here in SoCal. We're tiny, and we've got to be very careful about how we move forward. We're not likely to take big risks.
Yeah. Joe, do you have any other that's come up that I haven't hit on?
What got you into gaming originally?
Oh man, I've been gaming since I was a child. I can remember when I was about 12, my father bringing home the basic Dungeons and Dragons set. We played it once, and he was like, I don't know that. And so I got it, my little brother and I would play. Just last night, I found my old Axis and Allies set, and in a back closet. I'm like, oh my god, I haven't played this since high school.
Yeah.
So we got that out and played it, and so I have never been a huge video gamer. There was a dark period during World of Warcraft where I maybe got a little too into that, but I tend to really enjoy board games, strategy games. I tend to play games that are a bit heavier than I make, so that's always a little weird. People ask me, when was the last time you played Boss Monster? And I'll say, I haven't played it in a while. You have to remember, when we're making a Boss Monster set, that's all I play for 6 months, and you get pretty burned out on Boss Monster doing it, if that's all you're doing.
Yeah.
I just always loved the transportive power of games, and it's one of the reasons that we tend to do heavily themed stuff. And it's also, I think, one of the reasons that we're good at what we do. We really play a lot of games, and to any designer out there, they always say, how should I be spending my day? I'm like, 2 hours out of every day should be spent playing games, and it should be a new game every couple days. That's the best way to learn what's been done. It's the best way to learn how games work, and it's the best way to learn what you want to do as a designer and do differently. It's very, very hard to come up with something truly unique now. There's just been so much done. So the games that stand out are often standing out for other reasons, and that's great. That's cool.
Okay. I think my last big point I wanted to hit on was conventions. How is it with the convention circuit and all, with and your experiences with that?
Yeah. So again, it all comes back to the size of our company. A bigger company can have a dedicated convention crew. Those guys will be on the road, 6 months out of every year. we've got families. We're small. That kind of lifestyle does not appeal to me at this stage in my life. And we're also small enough that we can't necessarily afford a full-time crew. So we do Origins, we do Gen Con, we do PAX Unplugged, and let's see, we'll do Gamma occasionally. And that's really it. And we get plenty of exposure and plenty of PR out of those big cons. Conventions are fantastic. You get to see people playing your games. You get to see what the response is face to face. So they're invaluable experiences for designers and publishers. It's also where we meet a lot of new designers. We review a lot of game submissions. We rarely pursue those because we're really looking for a certain type of game and a certain experience. But I love them. Conventions are terrific. They are a lot of work. I'm typically exhausted and sick and tired at the end of a convention, but there's just no replacing them. They really are a blast. And if you're a game designer or a wannabe game designer or publisher, you need to be going to the big conventions. You need to learn how it works and see what happens. You need to volunteer in people's booths. You need to go to the the cardboard rooms where people are showing off their prototypes. They're great. Yeah, I mean, everything about this job is just fantastic. There's no better job in the world without a doubt.
Nice. Joe, do you have anything to finish up, or I think I kind of hit all the major points that I was thinking about. I guess the last, I do have one more, but just to finish up. But if you don't have anything else,
go ahead.
So why don't you at least let us know a little bit about Call to Adventure, since that's your latest game?
Yeah, Call to Adventure is a hero crafting game. It's a little bit of an engine builder. I often will describe it as sort of Splendor with adventure. Okay. You're sort of a hero. You start with 3 cards: an origin, a motivation, and a destiny, which give you both powers and sort of how you'll score your game. So everyone's game is a little bit different. It's 2 to 4 players. Actually, it's 1 to 4 players. There is a solo mode. And you are essentially, over the course of the game, facing challenges which have a difficulty requirement, acquiring traits which you have to sort of meet a requisite to build, getting allies or facing adversaries. And when you're doing something confrontational where you're facing off against somebody else, a challenge or whatever, instead of casting dice, you're rolling runes. And the cards that you've acquired tell you which runes you're able to roll. So that's the engine builder part of it. Your character gets better. They might start with a point of strength and a point of dexterity, but by the end of the game, they might have 3 points of strength and 2 points of dexterity and wisdom and some intelligence. We use the sort of classic Dungeons and Dragons abilities because people know those. It is really cool because it's based on this sort of foundational fantasy fiction. So all of the cards are sort of classic fantasy tropes. There's face off against the dragon, the crime lord, the demon, and you're building the story as you go. So at the end of the game, whether you win or not, you've got this great story to tell about the hero that you made. And so one of the things we hear from lots of people is, I play the game, I don't even worry about how I score, I'm just there trying to build the coolest story. And it really is fun watching people tell their stories at the end.
Cool.
And it's been really fun. The expansions are set in the world of famous fantasy authors. So the first expansion is in Patrick Rothfuss's Name of the Wind series. The second expansion is in Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archives. And so that's been great, getting to work with those guys and giving people a chance to build heroes and tell stories within their worlds.
Cool. Nice. Well, thank you for joining us. This has been really interesting. Got to hear a lot of cool stuff, and glad to learn about all the games you got there too. So,
thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah. If you just want to leave the call, we'll readjust everything and switch over what we're doing in the show. So,
all right. Thanks, guys. Take care. I'm glad we were able to make this happen.
Sure. Yep. Definitely. All right. Have a good one.
Take care.
All right, let me switch over to 2-camera mode for us, just so we're correct. Hey, it's mostly correct. There we go. I got it correct. So yes, let's move on though, because I do want to hit a bunch of other topics before we end today, and that was a really good interview that took a little longer. Why don't we talk unearthed arcana?
Yes. So yeah, this one's definitely going to the darker side of things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a good way of saying it. New cantrip, Mind Sliver. Using psychic energy to, like, ravage their minds. I like the sound of it. I mean...
Oh no, my mind's been ravaged!
Mm-hmm. So, we have the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, who, I mean... Aberrants, aboleths, mind flares, other horrible things. I mean... Yeah. Mm-hmm. They describe it as alien influences wrapped its tendrils around you. In mind and body. Yay!
Yeah, I mean, I it's definitely interesting. Definitely an interesting build, especially when you get to some of the higher levels and you get into some of the body changes that you can do.
Oh yeah, or warping reality at 18th level.
Yes, but like at 14th level, it's like, oh, you gain a swim speed or fly, or your body and your equipment become flexible, basically, and covered in ooze, and you can squeeze through things.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Or the grossest one, your eyes turn black or become withering sensory tendrils.
Tentacle eyes.
You are aware of the location of any hidden or invisible creature within 60 feet of you.
Yeah. It just, you see everything around you. I see everything.
Yeah. But you also get some, you also get some really nice AC bonus.
Yeah.
You're not wearing AC. Your base is a 13 plus your dex modifier. That's awesome for a sorcerer.
Yep.
And you get some interesting additional psionic spells.
Yeah, it feels like they're going for a little bit of psionics without having to go full actual psionics.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost the sorcerer's origins with this one is almost kind of somewhat similar to a warlock, because you're getting like special stuff because instead of making a pact, you're just kind of screwed over by a ancient horror.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely
that was a great way to say it.
Yeah. But it's definitely an interesting thing, especially like if you're doing like a darker game or something. Yeah. I think that would really add some flavor, even maybe for an evil game.
Yeah, I could see it. Yep. I could see it just being also like a normal sorcerer dealing with the facts that they've been warped and horribly corrupted too. So there's a lot of different paths you can take with using it. That'd be interesting.
Yeah. Well, I like also the unique disturbance part that they have in there that, there's stuff, basically you kind of are almost oozing aberrantness from you.
Yeah.
And it can affect the world around you or the people around you in different ways.
Enjoy.
It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Did I just start sweating ichor?
Mm-hmm. It's pleasant. And then, of course, we have the Warlock's otherworldly patron, which is, in this case, the Lurker in the Depth, which is like being Dagon from Lovecraft rather than Dagon from D&D, which is a demon lord. So it's like supposed to be that, more traditional Lovecraftian, like, creature of the deep kind of thing.
Yeah, you also will get some changes in your body. Like, the examples are like, for example, a Kraken's Warlock might summon a great squid-like tentacles, secrete crab claws, or serrated crab claws, not secrete, that would be weird, or a massive octopus beak, while a servant of a primordial water elemental might create tendrils or swells of living water.
Well, it's supposed to be like that you're making this pact with a being that's not quite like a deity, it's just a powerful being, and it's manifesting powers that are connected along with that. So this is supposed to be more like, yes, it's very elemental plane of water technically, but it still has that feeling of something very otherworldly. Definitely.
Yeah.
You do gain some interesting things, like you can breathe both water and air, a swim speed, that's fairly cool. The fact that you can unleash a torrents of, water-ish kind of stuff. What is this here? I'm sorry. 30 feet away from your Patreon, tears through reality, manifesting a measure of its tholastic grandeur. Oh, that's right. You manifest part of your patron in a spot because reasons.
Yeah.
So
I like devouring maw.
Yeah. Yep. Giant horrible mouth creep thing that does stuff that's bad. This is just really dark and unpleasant kind of like deals in this one. Definitely. They're very interesting.
Also, the 14th level ability.
Yeah, the Unleash the Depths.
Unleash the Depths. You can transport up to 5 willing creatures 30 feet of the manifestation point in your grasp by spectral tentacles yanked through the patron's realm. And the tentacles transport you within 100 miles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just insane.
Yeah, like tentacles come up and wrap around you and your willing friends, and then they teleport you somewhere. Teleport tendrils. Oh, thank you, tentacle friend! Oh.
Or Fury, where you direct a barrage of spectral tentacles to issue forth the strike of up to 5 creatures within 30 feet of the manifestation point.
Yep.
For 6d10 cold or lightning damage.
And knocking him prone. Yay!
And then these tentacles vanish.
Yep. Either way, you have tentacle friends. Man.
Oh god, and then there's a new spell, Mind Sliver.
That's what I was saying, the Mind Sliver, where you do horrible mind stuff to people. No, this is a very interesting idea for a lot of stuff that they've put out. The kind of like... I guess it's more of like the psychic attack and psychic abilities on the sorcerer side, while the warlock is going for like a very like horrible alien water feeling to it.
It's definitely more storm, water, lightning.
Well, I think it's supposed to be feeling like the creatures from the death we would not recognize. Things like a kraken, a giant squid. They're very alien, but they are things that are like deep in the water, and I think that's what it's supposed to be feeling. It's more that like alien deepness, and so I think both of them are trying to capture a little bit of that alien danger, I would say, because the one is supposed to be like the aberrant creatures and the dealing with them, but it's like a different direction that they're going for both of them.
Right.
So it's interesting, and definitely these are unique directions for taking characters that I think would be very interesting to play, just because it would be a very difficult catch-22 almost, and like you're dealing with very dangerous, very, as I said, alien things to what's the norm.
I can see this actually, the sorcerer also working in the our Thursday game.
Yeah, oh god. Mm-hmm.
With how messed up everyone is already.
Messed up friends. But I think we do want to keep running through these because we do have a lot to talk about today. I do want to briefly talk about that Pathfinder's 2nd edition demo adventure available. They put it out there, so for those...
It's free.
It's free, yep. That's a big important thing about it. It's the Torment and Legacy 2nd edition demo. It's 6 per-generated characters that you could use, and full praise of references for each. A quick reference sheet for 2nd edition. Now, they do say, like, there is complete adventures within this stuff, but you need more than just the adventure if you are starting out. Like, you can do a little bit of it, but the complete adventure, you do need a core book, at least. Right. And then dice, a flip map or some way of representing it, pawns and miniatures, all those kind of basic things. The basic things. Like, they do, again, recommend flip map and, pawns, but they say, like, you can do it on your own if you can replicate it, which, I mean, that would be something I would do more anyway. But no,
Right.
I mean, the fact is that I know it's meant to be an entryway, but you do definitely need the core rulebook with this one, again, as the only important thing about this one. It's not self-contained. And that's something important really to note about it, to keep in mind. So, and of course dice. But if you are introducing people to Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and most definitely newer people to role-playing, and you're going to use Pathfinder 2nd Edition, a little demo adventure is not a bad idea at all. It's a pretty good idea. So I definitely would recommend it for checking it out. So
Yeah, it looks interesting.
that it does. And I might grab it for my own use for something, because it is free. But so there is one I wanted to talk about, which is a pretty big one, which is Monte Cook has put out a consent in gaming book, because it's basically, they're trying to be like, this is how you travel mature content. So it's basically trying to get into dealing with a lot of the things that can occur in a game and how it works with your players, because it's more than just, when you say consent in gaming, that makes you feel like there's a lot of open-ended to this, but or a lot more cutthroat in what it's doing. That it's more like, you know, that usually harkens more to relationship and what's a nice way of saying this, intimate relationship kind of things. But this is a lot more than this, because it's a shared experience and things can happen. Things they talk like, you got things like body horror, violence against children and animals, relationships of any kind, and other challenging scenarios they go into, and talking about there's ways that you can identify problems that can arise between players and dealing with them in games. So
I have some issues with this.
okay.
One, basic rule of thumb, you know, a DM should always be giving a synopsis of a game and, you know, an idea of, you know, kind of where the, you know, what the game is about.
Yes.
Two, try to know the people who you're playing with, know their age ranges and stuff, you know, make things appropriate to that.
Yes,
But
definitely.
also, it's fantasy. You're going to have things that might make some people uncomfortable. It's just part of the gaming experience. If you're so uncomfortable that it bothers you a lot, maybe you should stop playing that. You know, just say, "Hey, this isn't my thing. I'm leaving. You know, I'm leaving this game." I don't think we need to have a book to suggest on how to do it. I think it's, and this is just my sole opinion, it's part of people being overly sensitive about everyone and everything. It's a larger societal issue, I think.
Well, I'm going to say for this one, yes and no. I can see how there's definitely a level of that to this entire thing, and I will definitely agree with you about that. But there are aspects of this too that I feel like is a common sense that sometimes people miss. And you talk about like being in a group that you more know. Well, the problem is that's not always the case with some gaming groups. Some gaming groups very early on might fall apart because of issues like this. Now, the other thing about it is they're not charging for it. And right. I think that's one of the major things is why I think this is a little better than what it could be. And I would say what it gives you is important to determine for you or yourself. Since it is free, you know, I definitely, that's one of those things is like, I know I've tried to do shock factor stuff, and the success of that has been a mixed bag in various games that I've tried to do it in. But again, it's like getting into some of this stuff. It's recognizing like what's too far, what's not too far. Some people are good at that. You are good at that. We are good at that. Some of the people we know, not so much. Like, I will say, I know some people that could take things too far, and I don't like playing with them. But if they hadn't, could we have sat them down and said, like, this is what's too far, for how you do things with your characters and stuff. And the thing is, that wasn't necessarily stuff that's very controversial stuff that I was taking, like, too far. There are other things that people can do to take things too far in various different directions.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could be overly descriptive about a torture scene or something that's something negative that's happening. You could go overboard on description. I would say.
Well, I was more implying that there are other types of extremes and people out there too.
Oh yeah, there are. I was just bringing it back.
Bringing it back to
this is pointing at.
Mm-hmm.
But then just have a discussion. If you feel that the GM goes on for like 20 minutes describing this horrible scene and it really makes you uncomfortable, pull them aside and say something.
But again, like, the need for that, I think, is the thing that they're trying to avoid. But I understand, like, yes, you're correct, that there's a culture to this out there that's a problematic part of our culture, that people take things too far on these ends. And I'm going to give the book, at least at this point in time, a benefit of the doubt kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read through it, so...
Yeah.
It just... It just strikes a note with me.
Give me a second, I gotta mute myself on the stream.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to continue while he's talking, but I think it's if you have you need to have a GM who, like I said, makes people aware of things. If it's not a group that you game with regularly, you do need to consider, okay, that to a point, I think. But I think if you're playing in a fantasy genre, you have to expect some of this stuff as well.
Yeah, no, I will agree that you will expect something of all of this. And you will expect, like, certain things. But I think...
I mean, unless you're playing like My Little Ponies, it's not going to be all rainbows and sunshine. Because then it wouldn't really be much fun for the most part.
Yeah.
If you're fighting some big bad guy, he has to have done something probably really bad to make these people decide they're going to take a portion of their life to track him down and stop him.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But that's my little rant.
No, and I definitely agree with a large portion of the rant. I think if this is, like, it's not... Depending on your situation, depending on this group, this might not be even useful. That's one of those things I'm going to say about it. It's like, this is going to be something that I think... If you feel like you need to think about these things, as like maybe a new GM that wants to get into controversial things, maybe it's not a bad idea. But again, it's...
Or if you do a lot of role playing with a lot of random people that you may not know, it is things you may want to consider when joining a game or running a game. Of things that might make you uncomfortable may come up. As a GM, you want to give a heads up of maybe if you're going deep into, okay, our bad guy tortures people on a regular basis, and you're going to run into a lot of this theme in this game.
Yeah.
What level of detail do you use?
It's like a good example would be Madness. I try to use the fact that you like in the first adventure you encountered a lot of like torture chambers and stuff, but the thing is, and you joked about it, but the idea was you were encountering remnants of a lot of really horrible people. Now you really didn't find anything there because those were very old. You didn't you could see like, oh, these are like blood stained. It looks like they've been used a lot, but you don't see anything. But it implies it a lot, And I think that's the you don't have to show a lot to tell a lot kind of thing.
Right. I mean, even if you are in an active scene like that, you don't have to, unless your group really, wants it, you don't have to go in deep detail of exactly what's going on. You can give a brief overview and people will get the idea. You don't have to go into a graphical description of, this guy's getting his toenail pulled out slowly and he's reacting like this and blood splurting and stuff. Yep. You don't have to go into detail like that.
No, you don't.
Can just, kind of give a general feel of what's going on, and people's imaginations can put in the rest.
It's like you don't need it unless it's important to the story. And if it's important to the story, that's when you should worry about talking with people, especially if it's something that you're doing as a GM or DM. If it's players that are doing something, then that's a little harder, because then it's a matter of like finding a good point to sit a player down and working with a player. Because the thing is, you don't want to turn a player off to the game if they are an okay player. Like if they're someone that you feel like, is relevant to the group, helps out the group, maybe does some things which seem very like inappropriate as their character, that's something. And it's the idea that like I think some people think that what they can do as their character is a lot more open-ended because they can't do it in real life, and that is the trouble, because again, there should be consequences for everything. Even in like medieval situations, there's oftentimes consequences for everything, and it becomes hard to delineate those consequences sometimes, especially for characters in game, that it makes sense in the setting you're in.
Right.
It's the unfortunate thing. And there are definitely a lot of games which deal with a lot of dark stuff. Like World of Darkness. It's modern day and it's very horror. The entire idea, like with Vampire, it's you trying to compete with becoming a monster. How much can you hold on to your humanity, and how much you just become an actual horrible monster in Vampire? And that can lead to a lot of like things that could go very dark if you're not careful. And I can't say there's a perfect way to deal with any of these. And again, like, maybe this is for you if you don't know where you should draw the line, or you want some help figuring out where you should draw the line, and you don't have
or maybe if you have had players who complained about stuff.
Yeah, then maybe getting some ideas is never a bad thing. And again, this is free, which is one of those big things that helps. It's 13 pages. I just took a brief look over it. I do feel like, again, Joe, I will agree with you, it's a little too far from just a quick, like, little look over. It just seems that way. Maybe if I would read it more in depth, I would get a better feel of it. But
right, and like I said, I haven't even had a chance to really gloss over it. I just kind of read what the synopsis was about it, and it's just like, I can understand it can be useful. I'm not saying it can't be,
but
I just think a lot of it is common sense.
Yes, I definitely agree on that one. It's common sense that hopefully you and your players have, but they don't always, and that's the problem. Common sense doesn't always hit us all. Let's do a quick little review of a few board games then. Just some smaller stuff. I'm not going to bother throwing the pictures up I was going to, but let's just go over the 3 games that were coming out, and then we may hit the weird RPG. I don't know. We'll see where we go with this one. So Ticket to Ride. It's technically the Ticket to Ride to Japan. is what we're looking at here. But it's part of their map collection volume 7. They have Japan and Italy. So I mean, it's like, it's still Ticket to Ride. It's just like different maps with a couple of different things on it. Like I'm curious. Like they talk about like there's bullet trains for Ticket to Ride. So I mean that's different than a normal kind of train.
Yeah, I guess they're kind of like maybe express routes or something.
Yeah, special express routes and stuff. Japan board offers some cooperative gameplay. Some routes need the bullet train network.
Okay, yeah, those are like gray spaces that have like arrows on them, it looks like.
But the thing is, then anyone that claims a bullet train one, you get it, but other people can use it. So it's sort of like the semi-cooperative.
So it's kind of like a train station that anyone can use.
Yeah. So it makes it very interesting of like a very tough competition there too. And I think that's it does expand enough on it that I feel it's a kind of interesting thing.
Yeah, I think that's a cool new aspect because it's like you're the ones who is going to get the points for having it.
Yeah.
But people can still bridge off your bullet train. It's like, oh, well, you're going to basically get off train X to get onto train Y.
Yeah. And they say like some of the routes are reserved for the bullet train network, and so once all the one of those routes is claimed, it can be used by players to complete their destination. On the other hand, the player contributes the most to the shared project will be rewarded a large bonus. So you get a bonus for the most routes on the bullet train network you put in, basically, or the most trains into it you do. That's a cool one. And then Italy's the other one, which I wasn't really getting into much more, but it's a lot about its regions, a lot of ferries. And if you connect cities for all regions of the same network, you score extra points. So they got their own little ways of doing it. So it's interesting. I think it's the same box, but you can see it two-sided. I'm not sure, because they say it's like they focus on the Japanese one just because that seems to be interesting with its cooperative mechanics, but they call it the Ticket to Ride Map Collection 7. So it's in there.
Wow. I just looked. You could get a straight bullet train route of 14 routes.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah.
I just thought that was interesting. It was like,
yeah.
Wow.
So it's an expansion that has in the box both maps, basically. I think it's probably two-sided, that one side's Japan, the other side's Italy. So that's kind of neat.
Okay.
So
yeah,
that is. So it does give you two different ways to play. Yeah, it's an oversized, double-sided board. The Japan map has 16 bullet train miniatures associated with progression markers. The 54 destination cards. The Italy has 56 destination cards and 10 ferry cards. So like there's I guess there's some ferry routes that you get on their own kind of thing. So like I guess it focuses more on ferrying on Italy. So it's interesting that they take the same mechanic but change things a little bit to make them very unique games.
Yeah.
And I do like the fact that this is technically an expansion because you're using it's really meant to be played with the base game. They don't give you like the full set of trains and stuff. It's just that like these are extra maps that you can get for it. So, yeah. And little components to play these extra ways of doing it. And I think that's an interesting thing they do for Ticket to Ride. But Wizkids has announced a Coraline game, which is very interesting because I didn't expect this to exist.
I'm not surprised they would make that a game would be made for Coraline.
This far
since the movie came out.
That's what I was thinking.
That's a bit surprising. Mm-hmm. I mean, God, how many years has been since?
I don't know.
I'm going to look it up. Go ahead and continue talking. I will look up.
It's a cooperative. Coraline came out. It's a cooperative card game. It's coming out in December. It's Coraline, Beware the Other Mother. The players become the ghost children who are taken prisoner by the other mother, and you're trying to free Coraline and her parents by acquiring items like the skeleton key and snow globe. It's a cooperative.
Okay, this is going to make you feel old. It's been a decade.
No, that makes sense. No, that sounds perfectly fine. 2009.
Yeah, February 5th, 2009.
Yeah. Nope. So yeah, so it's cooperative games, so you either all win or all lose. It's got 8 stand-up character tokens, plastic character tokens, 30 story cards, 30 bedlam cards, or bedlam is the other mother. 1 Coraline satchel card, 6 large room cards, 1 room map, 8 object tokens, 4 button tokens, and 6 moon cards, which I'm not sure much of it. It's $20. It's actually not too bad a price for a little game like this. It's kind of interesting. I think the interesting fact is it's a Coraline game 10 years off.
Yeah, I do think that's weird. And honestly, I'd expect this more from, like, almost Parker Brothers or something, one of the bigger ones.
USAopoly.
A lot of, or USAopoly.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who, you know what I'm saying? Someone who does a lot of the licensing stuff.
Oh yeah, no. There's some companies that I would see a lot more licensing stuff for them. This feels more like a Wizkids or an actual board game that we would normally talk about rather than something from like a Parker Brothers or some of the bigger companies. So I could see it, but I would definitely feel like there's companies like Wizkids or USAopoly, which does a lot more licensed stuff. Now, granted, Wizkids does some licensed stuff, but this is like an
also
odd
10
license.
years off the mark.
Yeah.
Like, I could see USAopoly maybe doing something 10 years off the mark. Not that they're a bad company, but that, someone maybe, came up to them and said, hey, would you like to license something from us?
Well, like, USAopoly, they do things like, the Die Hard game, which we were talking about earlier this year. I mean, that's a timeless one. Coraline is a good movie and a very good book, but I don't know if it's as timeless. Like, I would watch Die Hard once a year if it's on TV at some point in time. That's how good a movie it is. Coraline, I don't know.
I'd watch it if I happened to scroll by it and I had nothing else that I was particularly interested in watching. I'd stop and watch it again. It's a good movie.
Okay, and I can't say it's that, but like for like Die Hard, I could see like being like a Christmas tradition. Yeah, like or like a Christmas tradition of it. I could see going out of the way to be like, I kind of feel like watching Die Hard again. Coraline.
I mean, I guess for kids it could be a standard for Halloween.
Yeah, maybe, but still. Again, I'm just trying to say, like, it does feel like it's an unusual...
It is odd. It's an unusual choice to do it now.
Yes.
Like, when the movie came out, or around the couple years after the movie, I could see it, but a decade after, it is a little odd.
Well, it's kind of hard, because it's a property that would be kind of hard to do at any time with the kind of time frame we're talking about. Because, like, even 5 years ago probably wouldn't have been the same market, though. They have a market for putting stuff out right now.
Right.
But is it, like, a good time for this market to exist? I don't know. Hard to say. But, I mean, if you like Coraline, the book or the movie, and it's a $20 game and it looks kind of interesting, I like a good cooperative game. Cool, don't make a mess. Be good. I'm still on show. Yeah, I'm still on show, so, be good. Let's then talk about the last one of these little board games, Hako Onna. Yeah. It's a spooky Japanese horror hide and seek in English for the first time. So this is something that I think was a Japanese card game, I guess. I don't know about it.
And you can kind of see that inspiration on the box.
Oh, yeah.
In the artwork.
It definitely has that kind of, like, Ring/Ringu or, God, I should know the name of it. The other one that starred Buffy for the English version of it. The Grudge.
The Grudge, oh, yeah.
It's got that kind of Japanese horror feel. So it's a 3 to 5 player game, an asymmetrical game where one player is the Hako Onna, the box woman, haunting the house where spirits reside, eliminating all who encounter her. It's also like, I guess, Fatal Frame ones. Those are very Japanese horror video games, so it gets you an idea of like the kind of Japanese horror that's a very ghost things. And the rest of the players are visitors trapped in the heart of the vengeful spirit, and you have to escape or defeat the... So it's basically one versus the group. It's the asymmetrical kind of board game and the entire idea of it. So I can understand it being 3 to 5 players. So the idea is you have to lay Hako Onna to rest, collect the keys, and locate the secret exit so they can safely escape. But if all the players are killed before they can complete their objectives, they meet their doom and are cursed to remain in the house with her forever. Yay!
Doom, 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 doom.
That's so pleasant sounding. Stay in the house forever with me. Forever. So
Hang out with me.
It's coming out this month. $30. It's got 7 rectangular room tiles, story tiles, rectangular boards, noise tiles, a noise disc, barrier markers, 28 cards, and 6 noise cards. So it's got got a lot of cardboard components, so I can understand it being around 30 for this little thing here too. It's got a lot of tile starts.
It's an interesting concept.
No, it is. Definitely. I guess if you like a little horror, and this is like the one, and especially Japanese horror, and you want to try another one versus group kind of games, this is one to check out. And it's coming out this month, so coming soon. Oh no, it's now available. I'm sorry, it just came out. Now available.
Might be fun for Halloween.
Do we want to talk about the weird thing?
That's up to you. It's really weird. I don't know much about the Tingleverse.
It just seems weird.
It seems like I thought what really made me laugh that you had this on the docket with the other one with the thing about consent in gaming.
God, yeah, no, I mean,
because this breaks consent in gaming.
Oh God. Well, it's like I had 2 weeks of stuff, so I had to go through and find all the good stuff from it.
I agree.
Interesting, and this would have been last week interesting if we had the show last week.
Right.
But look, why don't we keep this simple on this one? It's a 270-page book of a lot of stiff.
Stuff. There's some stiff in it, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mindfart. Stuff. Yeah. Give me a second. I got another call. I'm busy today.
It looks like it definitely brings up some sexual things in it. So, yeah. An entrepreneur moves to Montana and opens up a petting zoo for creatures of the void. They claims the cages are secure, but when a big storm rolls into Billings, some of the creatures escape. Was their plan all along? Here, reverse twin shows up with a mysterious box, looking for a place to stay. Strange noises are heard in
your
the
reverse
of the
twin.
library.
I don't. This is just. I don't know. 4 playable types. Dinosaur, Bigfoot, human, unicorn. Okay, give me a second. There's still yet another copy.
This is just absurd. Yeah, it looks very, very, very odd.
Way too odd. You got playable types and trots. Bad boy, charmer, sneak, true buckaroo, and wizard.
Okay, here's an example. So the page I'm looking it up is from Amazon Prime, and it has some of Chuck Tingle's other stuff. And one of the books is Not Pounded by Anything.
Why is it a dinosaur man?
I think they take place in his book. There's also a unicorn man on the cover.
All right, you know what? I'm done. We're done with this. It exists. Congratulations. If you're into that kind of thing, or you want something weird, knock yourselves out. Go ahead.
It's only $20 on Prime.
Just knock yourselves out. Anyway, regular segments. We don't have a deeper discussion. Kickstarter corner. Do you got anything to talk about a little bit?
Did not get a chance to.
I got a couple I can shout some stuff out
Well,
with.
I can bring one quick thing up. for Magic Arena people,
Yeah.
things are going to be changing as around, I think it's the 26th, 27th of this month. They are going to be putting the first, I think, 3 sets that were available, and the first 3 or first 4 that were originally available into a different category of gaming, and you can only play in that category. It won't be the standard anymore.
Yep. They're going out of standard. It's basically what it is.
Yeah.
So it's like the year marker is hit, and they're going out of standard. Hey, pay attention to it.
Yep. So things are changing.
Yep. So I'm just going to shout out 3 quick starters here. First one is a weird one because it's a tabletop fishing RPG. That's also anime inspired. Rod Reel Fist. It's got its funding, so if you're really interested in it, the idea is that you're like, I guess you're like an anime fantasy character, but you got to go fishing for your village. But you know, there's monsters and like dangers in the way to go fishing. So, you know, quest. Yeah. That's the easiest way to describe this without going into too weird of detail. It's interesting. And you're guided by a swamp being, which is a player, but is also not one of the fishermen. So it's sort of like a GM, but also player, because they interact with a lot of things and play around with it. The swamp being, or SB. That's an interesting... So I think that's one of the things that threw me out as this game, is that you have, rather than a full, like, storyteller, DM, GM, you have a partial player who's also that. And whose interactions with the players kind of respond to things. Kind of interesting there, that you kind of take on the role that you're kind of part of a player too, in a way. So, yeah, 22 days to go. It's funded, so if you want to get to it, go ahead. Then we got one that is, let's skip that one. That was a little interesting, but not too interesting. There's the other interesting one, which is almost funded. 7 days to go. It's at 8,000 out of 10,000. It's Tenebria, Remnants of Rome. I should link both of these in chat, and I haven't. I'll get the rod reel up in chat quickly. There we go. And this one, it's a survival and resource management RPG. It's supposed to be set after the fall of Rome. The idea is that you're like a small group of like people trying to most likely surviving what has happened. Like, you know, the Roman civilization has fallen, and as far as you know, you're the last Romans stranded thousands of strata from anywhere. So you basically have your training as a soldier, the Eagle Standard, and your will to preserve civilization to try to, like, you know, put things back together. And it's kind of like a fight for survival where you can create kind of like, can you contribute to rebuilding, meet other refugees, fight against those that might try to break what you're preserving. So it's got a lot of ideas of like a very survival with a Roman kind of feel to it. So I think that's kind of interesting, and that's why it got my attention too. Kind of neat. And it's a D6 system, just to kind of go over it. But yeah, it's relatively close. It's at 80% of its goal, so it might still hit it before the end of the time. So keep an eye on that one if you're interested, or back it. Do we want to talk our week in tabletop?
There hasn't been a heck of a lot.
It's been a mixed bag when it's come to playing on Saturdays. And
I don't think we've done anything the last 2 Saturdays.
Yeah, so I think that kind of throws it out, and we've been off like a couple of weeks, so I can't remember, like...
Last Sunday we did... was it one of the tabletop Sundays we did the robot or pirate
we did Get Bit.
thing.
We did Get Bit. And then we did Sushi Go because we were doing 2 smaller games.
Right.
Last week was Forbidden Island, which we did.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Which is always a fun one. And
we lost horribly on the first try of it within, a couple rounds?
Within one. Like 2 players' turns, I think we lost in. 2 players' turns, because I think whoever went first drew the Waters Rise, right, first turn. Second turn, a person gets the You're Screwed card. So, yeah. 2 turns.
But the second game, we did win. Mm-hmm. It was very close. We learned that if we would have ended up having to wait one more turn, we would have lost. Yeah.
And I think the one before that, because I think we've been off 2 weeks, was zombies. We did zombies.
Oh, yes.
So we've had a couple of sessions of Madness of the Land. If you want to check them out, shit went down. I think we had a week off, then a session last week, and then this week ended up off, and it was basically recovering from shit going down a little bit, and I think next time is going to be the full recovery, kind of. It's a 2-part recovery more than anything from shit going down, is the best way of saying it.
Yeah, a lot of shit went down.
So I think next week will be a lot of role-playing again, and a lot less adventuring and more fixing shit to a degree. The other games is I did do some Records of Evil. We did 2 parts during that week, I think. Yeah, during that time frame. Had some time at the hotel because they're now in modern day in Records of Evil, the Evil D&D campaign. Got a psychic message from a imp. Traveled to a visitor center to find out where a museum was because they didn't know. And then the second episode, they got to the museum and found the imp. More stuff happened that was funny and weird, and dealing with fish out of water, classic Faerun D&D characters and modern day Faerun kind of things. So, that sort of thing. And then Legacies of Kain had 2 sessions where we introduced our new character, played by Diamond Worm, who's been actually pretty great in joining us. And then they are dealing with the fact that in Germany, they have to play 2 sides of a political conflict between elders, and that involves them stealing a gorilla. Yep. Because one of the elders wants a gorilla for very devious needs. So they're stealing a gorilla.
I hate when people steal gorillas.
Yeah, no. So they're coming up with a crazy plan to do that. So, no, the great part of that was we spent all 4 of us were spent 20 minutes on satellite view in Google Maps, discussing ways that would be relevant to breaking into here. It was the weirdest conversation. But we had I had to step back for a second and be like, what the hell are we doing? This is a game on stream. But this is some but the audience was yeah, this is weirdly entertaining. This is weird discussion you're having. So it was fun. And I think that's it pretty much for our weeks in tabletop.
Yeah, I think that covers everything.
Alright, and we'll just quickly hit on our hour-and-a-half mark here as we go into Consult the Table, where you can reach us at our Twitter accounts. On Discord, you can hit me up in my actual Discord link below, or if you message me directly, it's fine. Message Joe directly. He's actually in my Discord channel, so you can find him there. You can, as I said, Twitter in the description of this video when I throw it up on YouTube. If you're here in the Twitch chat, yeah, you can throw out a question. Probably. It's around an hour and a half. We hit the show normally close to the end of it. Yep. I did pretty well, chat. I did pretty well. Grumble. Or there's discussingtabletop at yahoo.com, which I had to remember there because I almost forgot it. Forgetful. There. So, I think that's it. I think I got through everything. I think we hit all the important points. We talked about all the important things, and I think the insanity is probably ending for this week.
Insanity!
Yeah, I'd say thanks again to Chris from Brotherwise Games for joining us. That was awesome having him on. Again, Boss Monster is one of those games that I like a lot, and I did not realize the size of his company. As he said, I'm one of those people that when he says the size of his company, I'm like, really? So, hey, he got me to say that too.
Yeah.
At least mentally. But yeah, so we'll be back next week. We should still be on schedule. Should be back to normal schedule, pretty much for streaming. So the streaming schedule down below, I think I updated it. I might not have. I'm bad at updating stream schedules. But the links down below are all relevant to things like my Discord channel, Patreon, if you want to show some real good extra support. But, if you want to see more of our shows, Joe and me should be back next week. We might be having a guest next week. The next couple of weeks, we theoretically have guests. So,
Cool.
And remember, it's September, so a great way to actually support the channel is through subbing up in the top corner there. So, if you want to show some extra support, following is just great too. But, your choice. Anyway, yeah, I think let's get running. Just because we have a long day, and I've got a lot of driving to do today, so I want to get that done before it gets too late. So, yeah, I know. I'll at least be back tomorrow for Sundays at Tabletop, where Joe will probably be joining me. So if you want to see us play some tabletop games before then, I might stream depending on what's going on. So, everybody who joined us, have a great weekend. Hopefully see you tomorrow, and have a great rest of your day. So,
Yep.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.